what we're going to cover next is how to choose a chair, the basic fundamentals of seeing what fits right, and also how to set that piece of equipment up properly for the patient. Let's start with the width of the chair. Ideally, you want the chair to be as narrow as possible, not only for going through doorways and narrow spaces, but mostly so that the tires or the wheels where you're pushing fit underneath your armpits. And this will translate into a much better power transfer into the wheel. If you can get away with a 16-inch chair over an 18-inch chair, that alone is a 12.5% savings in energy put forth every time you're trying to push. So let's look at the wheels of a chair as far as width goes. There are several things you can do to correct width on the modern wheelchairs. So to determine how wide your wheelchair will be, simply measure your hips, and that will tell you if they're 18 inches, 16 inches, or whatever, and then go for a seat width that is close to this. And I say close to this because you don't have to be too fussy. Some of you may have some soft tissue on the side, and if you can hold that in just a little bit with side guards like this, you're going to be ahead of the game. So a rough estimate, though, is go by your hip bones and how much soft tissue you have as to how wide your seat should be. And then if you need to adjust the chair, you can simply do that by moving the axle mount. This large 1 1/8 inch bolt can be loosened up, and this axle sleeve can be threaded in or out to make the chair narrower or wider as you go. So you can fine-tune the width of your chair so that it's not rubbing on your sides. So if you gain a little weight, you can change it, and if you lose a little weight, you can change it back again. Okay? The next thing that I usually look at when we're looking at chairs is the back height. A general rule of thumb is the higher injury of the quad or the person, the higher the back of the chair. And that's only roughly true, I should say, because you could have a high injury if you're trying to push. You don't want to get so high that you get above the scapulas, and then the chair, the back of the chair, pushes the person forward. So if your back and the scapulas can come above the back of the chair, right in this area, you'll probably feel fairly comfortable and have the flexibility and mobility to lean back as well as forward with ease. But the height back, you have to have some height back in order to push the chair. Otherwise, you're just going to be falling over backwards. So too high, you may feel like you're falling forward all the time. And if it's too low, you'll probably feel like you're going to be falling backwards as you push. The next part that we'll consider is the dump of the chair. And this chair, which you can see if I hold the frame flat to the floor, has a lot of seat dump. And the dump is just the angle of this top rail in comparison to the floor. So the more angle to the back, the more dump the chair is said to have. This chair I use for playing tennis, and it has a lot of dump. And what dump basically does is it sits you in the chair and allows you to keep your body at a 90-degree angle while leaning you backwards a little bit to give you some stability. And some people like more dump, some people like the chair fairly flat. The more dump you have on some chairs, the faster you can push it, because the more area of the wheel you're able to push. So it's sort of like changing gears on a car. If you lower yourself into the chair, the more wheel you can push, and the further you can push with each stroke. But, you know, if you get too low, then the wheels become up under your armpits, then you're not able to wheel at all correctly. So there's a little area, a fine area there where it will feel comfortable, and then where it's not comfortable. And it depends on what you're doing. For playing tennis, you want to be fast. And for wheeling up hills or wheeling in rough terrain, you don't really want to be fast. You want to be strong. So you want to have a slower chair with more power than a fast chair with less power. Seat depth is the next piece of the chair that we'll look at. The general rule of thumb is you want the seat to be long enough to support your legs, yet short enough to get your hands behind your knees. And there are a few things you can do to cheat with seat depth, which is basically changing your cushion, going with a little bit longer cushion or a little bit shorter cushion. But the general rule of thumb is don't go so long that the chair is hard to turn around and has a long swing whenever you're turning, and not too short that you can't sit in it comfortably without your legs flopping around. And that's pretty much all there is to really the seat length of a chair.